Hey guys, tonight we dive straight into the smoky darkness of a Viking longhouse. Somewhere in the windswept Northlands, you're not in a cozy bed with a white noise machine tonight. You're a newborn Viking child, sticky with birth and gasping for your first breath of freezing, peat scented air. The fire is flickering low, casting orange shadows on soot blackened beams, and someone, probably a grandmother, wraps you in rough wool that smells like old sheep. You're here now, whether you like it or not. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born on a dirt floor, not a metaphor, an actual dirt floor. It's midwinter, so the floor's half frozen, and the room is full of low murmurs and coughing. The midwife is more used to goats than babies, but she's doing her best. You arrive in a rush of blood, steam, and ancestral expectation. If you're lucky, you're welcomed with a smile. If you're unlucky, well, some Viking parents did leave unwanted infants outside to return to the gods. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or reserved for children with visible deformities. But either way, let's just say, don't cry too loudly. Your mother's pale and exhausted. Childbirth in the Viking Age is one of the riskiest acts a woman can perform. There's no sterilization, no sutures, no epidural, just strength, breath, and prayers to Freya. If she survives, she'll be back to cooking and hauling water within the week. No maternity leave here. As for you, the first thing you notice is the smoke. It's everywhere. Viking longhouses don't have chimneys. The smoke from the central hearth rises up and hangs thick in the rafters like a lazy ghost. Adults are mostly above it. You, however, are swaddled and sleeping at ground level. Your lungs are tiny and fresh, and now they're full of wood smoke. You cough a lot those first few weeks. The longhouse is crowded. You're not getting your own nursery. You're getting a sheep's wool blanket and a spot near the fire, right next to your older brother. 3 goats, and maybe a saddlebag of dried fish. You're also wrapped tight. Vikings loved swaddling babies so they'd grow straight and strong. They believed floppy limbs meant weak futures. So you're bundled like a sausage and barely able to move. You lie still, blinking up at dark rafters, listening to snoring, crackling fire, and the occasional pig grunt. Outside, it's bleak. Snow covers the roof. Wind howls through gaps in the timber. Wolves prowl nearby forests. There's a reason the longhouse is the center of Viking life. It's not cozy, but it's the only thing between you and the hungry dark. If you were born into a wealthy family, maybe your father owns land or sails with a powerful jarl, you might get a carved cradle or a symbolic ritual with naming stones and ancestral blessings. But if you're a peasant, like most Viking children, there's no fancy ritual. You're simply given a name and told not to die. Your name might reflect something strong like Bjorn, Bear, or Astrid, godly strength, but the truth is, most kids didn't live long enough to make names matter. It's a harsh thing to say, but in some villages, they didn't even name babies until after a few days. You had to survive the first week before anyone got too attached. Still, your parents do care. They're just tired. Always tired. Life in this world is one long grind. And you adorable little smoky burrito that you are both a joy and another mouth to feed. Your early days involve a lot of lying still and being observed. Are you breathing? Good. Are you warm? Sort of. Are you crying? Shh. That's not ideal. Crying attracts attention just from irritable relatives, but from spirits and trolls. Viking mothers often muttered protective charms while nursing, shielding their babies from the unseen. Oh, yes, you are already in danger from the supernatural. The Norse believed that dark creatures haunted the edges of life, especially around birth. Elves, for instance, weren't just sparkly little helpers, they were blamed for sickness, nightmares, and sudden death. You might get a bit of iron hung near your blanket, or a rune etched on a wooden pendant tied around your wrist. These were your first toys. And no, you don't get to sleep in peace. There's no such thing as silence in a Viking longhouse. People come and go, even in the middle of the night. Someone's always stoking the fire, stirring a pot, sharpening a knife, or arguing about something that happened 3 harvests ago. Sometimes your father sings old battle songs to himself while drunk. Sometimes your aunt screams in her sleep. You get used to it. There's one thing, though despite the filth, the noise, the cold, there's a strange kind of comfort in the closeness. You're never alone, ever. There's always someone within arm's reach. You feel warm bodies, hear the rustle of wool and the shifting of animals. A cousin scratches your nose when it itches. A sibling shoves your head off their leg so they can stretch. You are, in the most literal sense, part of the herd. Your sense of self will grow later if you make it past infancy. You might be baptized if your family's embraced Christianity, which is starting to spread, especially in the late Viking Age. But it's equally likely that you'll be lifted before the hearth and dedicated to Odin or Freyr. One ritual involved sprinkling water on the baby's face while declaring their name. Another included a feast, assuming there was enough food left after winter storage. Your survival isn't guaranteed. Illness, malnutrition, or bad luck could end your story here. That's not meant to be scary, it's just the reality of this time. Viking children had high mortality rates, yet the culture didn't crumble under that weight. They carried on, they told stories, they made music, they raised children in firelit shadows and passed down strength through memory and mead-soaked tales. And now, you've made it through your first month. You're still here, still coughing a bit, still swaddled, but your eyes are open wider now. You're watching, absorbing, and soon, you'll be expected to do more than just survive. You'll be expected to contribute. By the time you're 3 months old, no one calls you a baby anymore. There's no soft babble of baby talk, no plush toys, no gentle lullabies sung just for you. In the Viking world, you're not treated like a fragile bundle of sweetness. You're treated like a very small person with a job to do. And that job? Stay quiet, stay warm. Don't die. Don't bother anyone. You don't have your own room. You barely have your own space. You share your sleeping area with siblings, parents, goats, and probably a thick, half-moldy sheepskin. There's no crib. Maybe you get a little wooden box lined with hay if someone had time to carve it. Otherwise, you sleep wherever there's room, and that often means wedged between people and livestock. If you cry too loudly, people notice, not always in the way you want. A tired older sibling might nudge you with their foot and hiss, "Shh." Your mother might offer her breast, more out of necessity than affection. And if it's the middle of the night and you're being especially fussy, you might just be swaddled tighter and placed near the edge of the fire pit close enough to stay warm, but far enough that your noise doesn't wake the whole household. This isn't cruelty, it's survival. Your parents have so much to worry about: fields, food, firewood, the looming threat of raids, disease, neighbors who are too nosy or too quiet, and a baby's comfort doesn't always make the top of the list. That's not to say they don't love you. They do. But their version of love comes wrapped in practical wool. not softness. If you're warm and fed, you're doing great. And that tight swaddling, it's not just a Viking thing, it was common across medieval Europe. Vikings believed that wrapping a baby tightly in wool helped the limbs grow straight and strong. So your arms and legs are bound to your sides like a burrito, and you can barely wiggle, let alone crawl. Your view of the world is mostly ceiling beams and flickering shadows. Also, there's a high chance you're being passed around. Babies in Viking households weren't always raised solely by their biological parents. You might be nursed by an aunt, or held by an older cousin, or even handed off to a neighbor if your mother was needed elsewhere. The longhouse is a shared space, and child rearing is communal, which sounds kind of sweet until you remember that means lots of different hands, smells, and opinions on how best to keep you quiet. Sometimes you're set in a sling made of wool and tied across someone's back or chest. It's scratchy. The wool smells faintly of old sweat and sheep grease. But at least you're mobile, seeing the world sway around you as your carrier tends to chores or walks to the edge of the forest to check traps. When you start teething, things get even rougher. You cry more, drool more, wake up more, and the Viking toolkit for soothing babies is, let's say, imaginative. You might be given a carved piece of bone or antler to chew on. If your family's wealthy, maybe a bronze rattle, but most likely, it's a stick, a smooth stick, or a bit of rawhide, or a piece of dried roots soaked in honey. Honey, of course, being both a treasured resource and a natural antimicrobial, though nobody knew that part yet. You are also more likely to be weaned early. Breastfeeding could last 1 to 2 years if your mother was healthy. But sometimes she's not, or there's a new baby, or food is short and she has to return to hard labor. So you're handed over to cow's milk, goat milk, or thin porridge. None of these are particularly great for developing immune system, but they'll do. One fringe belief, possibly borrowed from neighboring cultures, was that you could strengthen a baby by giving them a taste of their father's blood mixed with ale. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic or actually practiced, but either way, it's not something you'd ask for at dinner. Discipline starts early, not with lectures or timeouts, but with sharp glares, quick slaps, and a very clear expectation that even the youngest children understand the way things are. If you cry too long, you're silenced. If you reach for food before your turn, you're scolded. If you throw something into the fire pit, again, you might get your chubby little hand smacked with a wooden spoon. And it's not just physical. The stories you hear are brutal too. No cheerful rhymes or silly picture books. Your bedtime stories involve betrayal, wolves, frost giants, and warriors who die screaming but gloriously. You're being trained for a world where survival is never a guarantee and softness is a weakness. You're not coddled. You're expected to adapt. The smoke in the longhouse still bothers you, but you cough less now. Your little lungs are adjusting. You barely notice the constant drafts. You've accepted the ever-present animal smells and your eternally runny nose. You've even started to smile, occasionally, and people smile back. Not always, but sometimes. There's affection here. It's just rugged, weathered. It doesn't come in lullabies, it comes in your sister tucking a blanket tighter around you before running off to scatter grain for the chickens. And as you begin to grow chubby arms getting stronger, eyes following the flicker of firelight, with sharper attention, you're already being watched. Not in a creepy way, though the house spirits might still be lurking, according to Grandma. Watched in the sense that your development is being measured. Are you strong? Are you quiet? Are you going to be useful? Because soon, very soon, you are going to have to earn your keep. You don't remember your first toy, but chances are it wasn't soft. There are no plush animals, no plastic blocks, no squeaky things that light up and sing when you press them. In your Viking childhood, toys are either handmade, scavenged, or imaginary, which means your very first plaything might be a bone, a real one, maybe a smoothed down rib from last night's roast goat, or the knuckle bone of a deer, polished from being handled and gnawed. You stick it in your mouth. Of course you do. That's what toddlers do. Nobody stops you. A bit of ash. Some old grease these are part of your sensory diet now. Sometimes, if your parents have time, they'll whittle something for you. A tiny wooden horse, a spinning top, a miniature shield. But these are luxuries. Your older brother might have broken it already, or the family dog might have eaten the leg off. So instead, you chase chickens, you throw rocks, you pretend a stick is a sword and spend hours thwacking it against tree trunks or unfortunate fence posts. You're not bored. You don't even know what boredom is yet. The world is wide, messy, and full of wonder, even if that wonder includes watching a beetle crawl through the mud while your fingers turn purple with cold. There's a kind of freedom here that modern kids would envy. You're not micromanaged. You're not bubble wrapped. If you want to wander around the longhouse poking things, no one stops you unless you're about to touch the fire or mess with someone's fishing net. Then you'll get a firm swat and a sharp nay. Otherwise, you're left to explore. You learn quickly what's allowed and what's not. You learn that pigs don't like having their ears pulled, that goose bites hurt more than you expect, that your older siblings will steal your bark doll if you leave it unattended, and you learn how to mimic watching how adults hold tools, stir pots, braid rope, or tell stories. That's how Viking children learn, by watching, imitating, and getting in the way until they were eventually useful. Formal education? Nope. There's no preschool, no playdates, no flashcards. Your curriculum is the real world. Every day is a living, smoky classroom, and your teachers are overworked adults who probably don't have time to explain why fish need to be gutted outside. At around 3 or 4, you become a kind of living shadow to older kids. You follow them, copy them, annoy them, and occasionally impress them. And if you're lucky, you get to help. Helping earns approval. You're sent to collect firewood, twigs, mostly, shoo chickens out of the food storage area, or carry little pouches of herbs to your grandmother. It's not glamorous, but it makes you feel important. There's a lot of noise in your day, not the mechanical hum of machines or the chirp of phones, just people talking, working, scolding, dogs barking, the creak of leather, the snap of sticks underfoot. Vikings didn't live in silence. They sang while they worked. They argued loudly. They told stories to keep the children busy and their own minds sane. One of the first stories you understand is about Loki and the goat. You don't know the gods very well yet, but you know Locust, the funny one. The mischievous one. In the tale, Loki ties his beard to a goat's beard, and they play tug of war until both scream and fall over. You laugh so hard, you spill your porridge. The grown-ups barely notice. They're relieved you're entertained without breaking anything. Sometimes, your toys are more symbolic. A small charm in the shape of Thor's hammer, carved from bone or amber. You wear it on a strip of wool. And you believe because everyone tells you that it protects you from illness, from frost, from evil spirits, maybe even from the elf that sneaks in at night to steal your breath. That's not just bedtime nonsense. Some Viking families believed in night elves that caused sickness in children. To ward them off, your mother might draw protective runes near your bed, or your grandmother might leave a small offering A splash of milk or a twist of bread near the doorway, just in case. Historians still debate how widespread those beliefs were. Were they regional superstitions or widely accepted spiritual practices? We may never know. But for you, they're very real. Just like the sound you swear you heard last night scratching against the wall near your head. As you grow taller, your world grows wider. You start venturing beyond the longhouse. Not alone. At first, but eventually, someone lets you wander to the stream with a wooden cup and tells you not to fall in. You almost do. It's cold. You shriek. They laugh. Lesson learned. You're expected to be tough. Even now. If you cry because you tripped, you're told to stop being soft. Softness is dangerous in Viking culture. It means you're not ready for what's coming. So instead of sympathy, you get a pat on the back and a "you'll live." But there's affection in that too. A strange, bracing kind. The way someone ruffles your hair after a hard tumble, or quietly gives you the last bit of dried apple when they think no one's watching. You're not coddled, but you're not unloved. And so you play. With bone toys, with sticks, with carved stones that might be dice, or might just be rocks someone thought looked cool. You invent stories. You pretend the family dog is a wolf you've tamed. You jump off stumps and call it flying. The world is a sandbox, and you're covered in it mud on your knees, ash on your cheeks, and something very suspicious in your hair. You don't know that modern kids have options like cartoons, tablet games, or foam mats. All you know is that today, you climbed a hay pile and declared yourself king of the goats. And nobody argued. You're 4 years old now, maybe 5. Honestly, no one's counting. In the Viking world, ages aren't celebrated with cake and candles. There's no preschool graduation. You just grow, and as soon as you're old enough to walk without falling every 10 steps, you're old enough to be useful, which means, congratulations, you've joined the family workforce. Your first real assignment, helping on the farm. Don't get too excited. It's not the kind of helping where someone gives you a tiny shovel and claps politely while you dig a hole that doesn't matter. No, your chores are real. If you mess them up, someone suffers. The chickens go hungry. The water bucket spills. Someone steps on the rake you forgot in the walkway and invents a new Viking swear word. So you get serious fast. At sunrise, someone kicks the base of your sheepskin blanket. Up. That's it. That's your alarm. You groan, because even at 5, you're already tired of mornings. The longhouse is still dim. The fire is crackling low. Your feet hit the cold dirt floor, and you wince because, yes, it's another barefoot day. Wool shoes are for grown-ups. You're still in your starter feet. First task, find the goats. They've wandered off. Again. No one knows how they keep escaping. But you're small and fast, so out you go barefoot, bleary-eyed, chasing after hooved chaos while fog rolls across the field like a sleepy dragon. Once the goats are back, -1, which will mysteriously reappear during lunch. You're sent to haul water. You can only carry half a bucket, so you make multiple trips. The path is slippery. You spill a lot. You hear about it. Water's too precious to waste. Your mother mutters. She doesn't yell, but her tone could sour milk. You try harder. Sometimes you help gather firewood. You're not allowed to chop, it's too dangerous, but you can carry branches. You drag them in a sack over your shoulder, grunting like a tiny ox. Splinters become a daily experience. So do bee stings, stubbed toes, and the occasional unexpected fall into mud. No one rushes to help you up. You're expected to handle it, There's a kind of rough encouragement here, a pat on the head if you do something right, a grunt of approval, a small nod, and while it might not seem like much, you treasure it. In a world this hard, any kindness glows like an ember. Oh, and forget about weekends. Vikings didn't really do days off. Even feast days required preparation. That meant more chores, not fewer. Animals still needed feeding. Fires still needed tending. If anything, feast days were more exhausting because there were more adults around, more mess to clean, and more chances for you to get yelled at for being underfoot. Your favorite job? Feeding the animals. It feels important. You scatter grain with dramatic flair. You learn which goat always tries to sneak 2 turns, which chicken is mean, which pig makes a weird squeaking noise when excited. You whisper secrets to them when no one's listening. They don't answer, but they're warm and soft and don't expect you to carry buckets or peel root vegetables correctly. And then there's the garden. You hate the garden. It's full of scratchy plants, bugs, and your least favorite task, weeding. You don't understand why weeds are bad, they're green too. But you learn quickly that if you pull up the wrong thing, your grandmother's scowl could turn milk into stone. Still, you do it because the adults said so, and because you're starting to understand. Life isn't optional out here. Everyone contributes, or everyone suffers. Meals become part of the rhythm of labor. Breakfast is usually porridge thin, gray, and always just a little too salty or not salty enough. You eat it anyway. Lunch might be fish, if someone caught some, or bread as dense as a rock. Dinner depends on what's left. There's no snacking. You eat at meals, and if you're still hungry, you chew on a carrot stub and call it a day. One day, you're handed a tiny knife. It's not sharp, more like pokey, but it's still metal, and metal means trust. You carry it everywhere, use it to slice bark, carve little faces into driftwood, pretend you're slaying frost giants behind the stable. You sleep with it under your blanket, just in case. Your sister makes fun of you, but she still checks to make sure it's tucked under your arm when you doze off. That knife, it's a milestone. It means you're growing. You're expected to handle a tool. You are no longer the little one. You're becoming a person. There's a quirky tradition in some Viking regions. On your first successful solo task, like carrying a full water bucket or herding animals without help, someone might give you a tiny token, a bead, a carved button, a small animal bone etched with a rune. It's not official, and historians still argue whether this was widespread or isolated folklore. But in your family, it happens. You get a little bead. It's blue glass, probably traded from somewhere far off. You keep it in a pouch tied around your neck, and you touch it when you feel scared or cold or unsure. Because yes, you're still a kid. You still cry sometimes, quietly, when no one's around. You still miss being held. You still wish someone would wrap you in wool and hum a tune while you drift off. But there's no time for that. The goats need feeding, the water needs hauling, and someone just shouted that the chickens got into the grain again. Time to go. Winter arrives like a heavy blanket soaked in ice, slow at first, then suffocating. The sky dims earlier each evening, and by midwinter, daylight barely lasts longer than a nap. You used to run barefoot through summer grass. Now your toes ache even inside thick wool socks, and the air stings your cheeks when you breathe. Welcome to Norse winter. You're a Viking child, and this is the season of endless dark, clumsy layers, and a kind of deep cold that wraps around your bones. The longhouse becomes your whole world. Days and nights blur, Everyone's stuck indoors, jammed together like smoked fish in a barrel. It's warm, sort of, mostly from body heat, firelight, and the animals tucked inside. But it's also smoky, noisy, and, let's be honest, pretty gross. There's no real ventilation. The fire burns almost constantly, which is nice for warmth, but less nice when your eyes start watering from smoke at breakfast. You learn to stay low, crawl under the haze, and avoid the areas directly above the fire where the air is thick and bitter. Your days grow repetitive. Chores still exist: feeding the goats, checking traps near the edge of the woods when the wind is too cruel, but most of your time is spent indoors. And here's the thing: there's not much to do. You're too young to help with weaving or repairing tools. You're too old to nap all day. So you fidget, poke at things, and sometimes get in trouble for asking too many questions. But sometimes when the chores are done and the grown-ups are in a good mood, there are stories. Not bedtime stories in the gentle sense. Viking tales are wild, dark, and sprawling. You sit cross-legged near the fire while someone recites a saga, their voice low and rhythm steady. You hear of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, of giants with flaming swords, of Odin walking the earth in disguise, testing mortals for wisdom and wit. You love those nights. There's a rhythm to them. Firelight flickers on the storyteller's face, and everyone leans in, even the gruffest uncle. You chew on a piece of dried meat or gnaw the edge of your wooden cup while the world outside howls. These tales fill your head with images of far-off battles and gods with strange eyes. They also, unfortunately, fill your dreams. Because Viking winter isn't just physically cold, it's creepy. You wake up in the middle of the night, blanket twisted, heart pounding. Maybe someone stirred in their sleep. Maybe the wind screamed down the chimney hole. Or maybe, just maybe, you felt something watching you from the shadows, from the rafter beams. You remember the tale of the Draugr, the undead Viking who guards his treasure from the grave, angry and cold. You tuck your bead pouch under your chin and breathe slowly, willing yourself back to sleep. Sleep itself is strange in these long winters. The house sleeps in waves. Some people nap during the dark afternoons. Others stay up late sharpening tools or mumbling to themselves. You lie awake sometimes, tracing the carved beams above your head, listening to the symphony of snores, fire crackles, and someone grinding teeth 3 feet away. You try not to think about the nightmares, or the old woman's warning that if you leave your shoes facing the wrong way, the spirits might get confused and steal your soul. Is that true? No one agrees. Historians still argue whether Viking children were truly raised in constant fear of spirits, or whether these stories were just meant to keep you from sneaking outside at night. Either way, they work. You don't go near the door after sundown. Food is scarce during winter. Root vegetables, pickled things, dried fish that taste like leather. You chew because you have to. Once in a while, someone slaughters a pig, and for a few days, the longhouse smells glorious roast meat, crackling fat, sizzling stew. You eat until your belly aches. Then it's back to thin porridge and fermented cabbage. Your games shift indoors. You make a tower from carved bone pieces, then knock it down. You try to catch a mouse in a sack, then release it and pretend it's part of a great heroic quest. You sneak behind your mother's back and draw on the wall with a charred stick. She scolds you, but secretly keeps the one that looks vaguely like a horse. And through it all, the dark presses in. You measure days by the sliver of light that creeps through the smoke hole in the ceiling. The sun, when it appears, stays low and orange, like it's not really trying. The shadows stretch long, The animals get restless, so do you. Sometimes the grown ups talk quietly at night about someone who got lost in the snow or the sickness spreading in the next village. You pretend to sleep, but you hear the worry in their voices. You wonder if the gods are angry, if maybe you forgot a ritual, if you should have left a better offering for the house spirit. Then someone gives you a hug, a real one. No sarcasm, no practical purpose, just warmth. And you cling to it because winter makes everyone softer in strange, brief ways. And then one day, a drip, a drop of water, snow melting from the eaves. You hear it and sit up, hopeful. The grown ups still act tired and grim, but you know the dark is cracking. Light is coming back, slowly, reluctantly, but it's coming. And you've made it through another Viking winter. By the time you're 6 or 7, the adults stop calling you a small one. They start calling you by your name more often, and not just when you're in trouble. It's subtle, but it's a sign. You're stepping out of the shadows of early childhood and into the wide, smoky hallway of real expectations. And one of those expectations, learning, but not the kind you're probably thinking of. You won't be carrying a little bag filled with scrolls. You won't walk into a warm schoolhouse with a slate under your arm and a teacher asking you to recite your vowels. There is no school in your Viking world, no formal instruction, not even a chalkboard. In fact, if you ever do see writing, it's probably in runes scratched into stone, carved into bone, or etched into wood. But reading, that's for others. Maybe for monks or future kings. Not for you. Instead, your whole world is your school. And your teachers, everyone around you. From the minute you rub the sleep from your eyes in the morning, you're absorbing, listening, watching, mimicking. The adults rarely explain things with the patience of a modern tutor. Instead, they do and you watch. Then you do and they correct. Maybe with words, maybe with a firm tap on the back of your head. You learn quickly what earns a nod and what earns that disappointed Viking sigh. Much of your education is oral. No surprise. Really, Vikings were masters of memory. Entire sagas, thousands of lines long, were passed down without a single scrap of parchment. You hear them again and again until your mind picks up the rhythm and your tongue starts to move in time. It's not unusual for you to sit near the hearth, half asleep, reciting half a saga to your goat just because it calms you. Stories are everywhere, at mealtime, during chores, especially in the long nights of winter. You hear about Odin, the one-eyed wanderer who traded his eye for wisdom. You shiver when someone mentions Hel, goddess of the underworld, whose realm awaits those who don't die gloriously in battle. And then there's Locatrickster, shapeshifter, chaos in a tunic. You secretly like him the most. Some nights, a guest a traveling skald visits your village, his wrapped in furs, soaked from sea spray or frost. But when he speaks, the fire seems to hush. He chants in deep rhythms. He moves his hands like he's painting pictures in the air. You don't understand every word, but you feel it, the weight of it, the power. You want that power too. So you start practicing. You speak lines from the sagas into the cold air when you're alone. You whisper stories to the sheep while they chew. And when your little cousin sneezes 3 times in a row, you calmly inform her that it's a sign from the Norns, the weavers of fate. She looks horrified. You feel proud. But education here isn't all epic poetry and metaphysics. You're also learning how to survive. Your father, or maybe your uncle, depending on who's around, starts handing you real tools now. Nothing sharp, but sharper than your stick knife from last year. He shows you how to carve with a steady wrist, how to hold a fish just so while gutting it, how to test a rope with your foot to see if it's rotted underneath. He doesn't say much, just gestures, grunts, corrects you if you slip, and when you finally get something right, when your carving doesn't splinter, or your knot doesn't come undone, you get a nod. One nod. That's your diploma. Your mother, on the other hand, teaches you how to notice. She says things like, "Look at the clouds. That's a bad wind coming." Or, "See how the chickens stay near the door? A fox has passed." She shows you which berries are safe, which leaves are medicine, and how to dry fish without attracting too many flies. She speaks softly, but her hands never stop working. You learn more by watching her than you ever do by asking. And when you do ask questions like, "Why does the wind sing at night?" Sometimes she answers with a smile. Sometimes with a story. Sometimes with a muttered, "Ask the gods." And you do, because you're starting to feel them now. Not in a spooky way, more like a constant awareness that the world isn't just dirt and rain and roasted goat legs. It's woven. There are patterns in the wind, messages in your dreams, portents in the way a crow turns its head. Your dreams have changed too. They used to be simple, falling, running, floating. Now they're stranger. You dream of wolves with glowing eyes, of a woman dressed in blue standing in a field of bones, of a ship with no sails sailing across the sky. You tell your grandmother, who nods slowly and says, "Some are born with the sight." You hope she means you. She starts teaching you about the old Wayseer, the mysterious magic that weaves through Viking belief like a hidden thread. Mostly practiced by women, but not exclusively. It's said that Seer users could see the threads of fate, shape the future, or call the wind. You don't know if it's real, but you want to believe. Historians still argue whether children were ever truly trained in this kind of mysticism, or if it was kept strictly for certain adults. But within your longhouse, the line between myth and memory is blurry. You believe what you see, what you hear, what makes sense at the time. One day, your uncle gives you a carved wooden raven. "Thought," he says, handing it to you. One of Odin's birds, the other is memory. Keep this one with you. It will listen when others won't. You do. You tie it around your neck with a bit of flax string. Next to your bead and your lucky antler chip, your pouch is getting heavier now. You like that. It means you're collecting pieces of yourself, because learning in the Viking world is not a matter of books or schools, it's a matter of inheritance. You inherit knowledge like you inherit land or scars. And one day, it will be your job to pass it on. For now, though, you sit by the fire, carving a line into driftwood with your dull knife. You whisper the saga of Balder to yourself. The goats listen quietly. Outside, the wind sings, and you think maybe, just maybe, it's singing back. You're 7 now, maybe 8. Again, no one's really counting birthdays, but you can tell by how your chores have gotten harder, your knife sharper, and your body more sore at the end of each day. You're not considered a little kid anymore, which is precisely when you learn this fun fact. In Viking society, children, especially boys, are often seen as almost soldiers. You're not handed a full sword, of course, but you're given something wooden and heavy, shaped just enough like a weapon to make your arm tired. It's not for play, it's for practice, and you're told in very few words that it's time you start learning how to protect your family. And sometimes that means learning how to become the shield. You're handed a round wooden training shield, smaller than the ones the grown-ups carry. It's too big for you. Really, it drags a bit when you walk. But the point isn't comfort. The point is endurance. You stand in the yard while your cousin, who's only a few years older but already bigger, whacks the edge of your shield with a stick over and over until your arms tremble. You have to hold, he grunts, or they'll break through. You believe him. Some kids cry, some quit. You grit your teeth and focus on not dropping the shield. Your reward? A nod, a grunt. Maybe a piece of cheese that someone accidentally left for you on the corner of the table later that night. And then the stories shift. Your family still tells sagas of gods and magic, but now they include you, or rather, the kind of person you'll need to become. You hear tales of young warriors who held the line while their fathers fell, of sons who died with spears in their hands and were honored with songs, of daughters who chased off raiders with nothing but a kitchen knife and a terrifying scream. These aren't bedtime stories anymore. They're instructions. You're taught to watch people's movements, to listen carefully when someone enters the house at night. You learn where the hunting bows are stored and which neighbors can be relied on when the alarm horn blows. You've never seen a raid yet, but you've heard the stories. Coastal villages often get the worst of it, but even inland, the threat is real. One night, the dogs bark late. Everyone in the longhouse sits up instantly. Your father grabs a spear. Your mother ushers you and your siblings into a corner. Behind the water barrels, you clutch your little shield with both hands, heart pounding. It turns out to be nothing, just a drunk neighbor stumbling home, but the fear lingers. It teaches you. You are expected to stand your ground, even if your knees shake. It's not just about fighting. It's about presence, about showing you're not weak. When visitors come, you're expected to meet their eyes, speak clearly, show your worth. If you hide behind your mother's apron, someone might joke that you'll be feeding chickens your whole life. And that's not a compliment. There's a kind of informal war school in every Viking village. A group of older boys, and occasionally very tough girls, gathers at the edge of the woods or by the river. They spar, they wrestle, they invent challenges. Who can leap the farthest, hold their breath the longest, swim across the icy stream and back without crying? You try all of it. Some days you win, some days you eat mud, but you're learning. And not just physically. You're learning tactics, how to use terrain, how to notice weak spots, how to feint left and swing right. Some of these skills come from older warriors who occasionally wander by and bark a few tips. Others just get passed down kid to kid, with a lot of bruises as punctuation. One winter afternoon, your uncle takes you on a long walk. He doesn't say where you're going, and you know better than to ask. Eventually, you reach a patch of flat snow beside a frozen lake. He sets a small sack down and pulls out helmets, 2 of them, one adult-sized, one child-sized. He tosses the smaller one to you. Try it on. It's too big, of course. Slides down over your eyebrows. But when you push it back and stand up straight, he nods. Better. Then he hands you a wooden practice sword as carved runes into the handle. Now, he says, stepping into the snow with his own blunt weapon. Show me how you stop me from taking your sister. It's a joke. Probably, but your stomach flips anyway. You charge at him with all the strength your wiry little body can muster. He blocks easily, parries, taps you on the shoulder hard enough to make your knees buckle, but you get back up, and he smiles. There's a fringed talion your grandmother sometimes whispers, when no one else is listening, about a time during a harsh winter when a neighboring village used its own children as a first line of defense. Not with real weapons, just with shields. The idea was that seeing children on the front lines might confuse the raiders. slow them down, distract them. Historians debate if it ever actually happened, or if it was just a terrible metaphor for how early Viking life trained kids to face fear. Either way, it sticks with you. You dream of it that night standing at the edge of the village, too small shield in hand, snow falling, your breath fogging the air. Someone approaches from the dark. You don't run, you hold. And when you wake, sore and groggy, your first thought isn't about breakfast. It's about where your little helmet ended up. You find it under the bench, put it back on, and whisper a promise to yourself. You won't be the one who drops their shield. Your clothes itch all the time. They scratch at your neck, rub your shoulders raw, and cling awkwardly to your knees whenever you try to crouch. But no one cares, not even a little. You've entered the stage of Viking life where comfort is optional and practicality rules everything. You don't choose what to wear. You're given what fits, sort of, and what hasn't already been passed down through 3 siblings and patched into oblivion. Your shirt is made of coarse, homespun wool. Heavy in the winter, suffocating in the summer. It smells faintly of smoke and sour milk, which is actually better than what it smelled like last week. You're wearing it again because it's dry, and it still has 2 sleeves. That's good enough. You have 1 outer tunic. 1. You don't rotate outfits. You just keep wearing this one until it starts falling apart or gets chewed by rats. Then maybe you get a new one, or someone else's old one, with new patches sewn over old ones, like a kind of wearable archaeological dig. And your shoes, hilarious. They're little more than soft leather bags tied around your feet with string. In the summer, they barely stay on. In the winter, they soak through within an hour. You can feel every pebble, twig, and grain of dirt through them. Walking across the frozen ground in those things is like tiptoeing on knives. And yet, you wear them anyway, because bare feet mean frostbite. And frostbite, you've learned, starts with a strange numbness and ends with someone heating up an iron tool by the fire while everyone avoids making eye contact. Your cloak, if you have one, is a scratchy rectangle of wool pinned at one shoulder. It's warm, sure, but it's also always slipping, always in the way, always flapping dramatically in the wind just when you're trying to be sneaky. You love it, though, because it makes you feel older, like someone in a saga. You've figured out by now that there are no buttons. Vikings didn't have them. Instead, your clothes fastened with brooches, pins, and tied cords. It's creative, yes, but also a nightmare when you're half asleep and trying to get dressed in the dark before your cousin steals your porridge. Laundry? Oh boy. Clothes get washed when they start to actively offend. Not before. The process involves hauling water, heating it over a fire, soaking garments with lye or fermented urine. Yes, you heard that right. And beating them with wooden paddles. You've helped with this once or twice. It smells like someone cooked a stew made entirely of socks, which is probably why most people don't wash their clothes all that often. You mostly air them out. Let the wind do its work. Rub some herbs on the sleeves and call it a day. You get used to it. You stop noticing the smells. Or, more accurately, your brain decides there are more urgent things to worry about, like whether your shoes have frozen solid overnight. One chilly morning, you wake to find your tunic frozen to the floor. You'd left it too close to the wall, where the night frost creeps in. You tug at it, and the fabric cracks a little. That's fine. It'll thaw once you're wearing it. Probably. And your underclothes? If you're lucky, you have a linen shift under your tunic. If not, it's wool on skin all the way. Nothing says start your day right like dragging a damp, scratchy layer over your shivering body while trying to keep your teeth from chattering. Viking children didn't complain much because complaining didn't help. You might try once. It itches, to which an adult would reply, so scratch it. End of conversation. They're not being mean. They just don't see discomfort the way we do now. It's part of life. Your clothes are supposed to be durable, not delightful. If you want comfort, go sit by the fire. If you want luxury, wait until the next trade ship brings something soft from the south, and good luck getting your hands on that. Occasionally, someone in your village shows off a bit of imported fabric, tiny strip of silk from the east, or finely dyed wool. It's vibrant, smooth, and wildly expensive. You touch it once and think about it for weeks, not because it's beautiful, but because it doesn't scratch. It's soft. And for a fleeting moment, you imagine a world where clothes feel like clouds instead of sandpaper. That dream dies quickly. The silk gets stitched into someone's funeral shroud, or traded for fish. You go back to your patched tunic and laugh when it gets caught on a splinter. There's a sort of beauty in the ruggedness, though your clothes aren't just garments, they tell a story. Each patch is a memory. That tear by your elbow, from when you slipped chasing the piglet, the burn mark on your hem. You leaned too close to the hearth while listening to Uncle Thorgil's ghost story. Your belt, just a length of leather, was cut from the same hide as the family water bucket. Somehow, that makes you feel connected. To the land, to the animals, to everyone who came before. Even your hair is part of the daily Viking chaos. It gets long, tangled, windswept. Your mother might braid it to keep it out of your face, or she might cut it with a knife, muttering about lice. Lice are a constant nuisance. Everyone has them. You just learn to live with the itch. Scratching becomes as natural as breathing. Once a traveling man passes through your village with a bone comb so fine and smooth, it looks like it was carved by the gods themselves. He offers it for 3 fish and a piece of amber. No one buys it. Too expensive. But you remember how it looked. The way it slid through a woman's hair like wind through grass. You dream about that comb for 3 nights. In the end, you learn to take pride in your strange, scratchy uniform. It might not be clean. It might not be comfortable. But it's yours. And in a world where survival depends on toughness, it's just one more thing that says, you belong here. You pull your tunic tighter, tie your shoes a little higher, and step into the cold. You don't eat 3 square meals a day. You eat what you're given, when you're given it, and often. It's not exactly what you call exciting, but food is fuel, and in the Viking world, you need a lot of it just to keep going through freezing mornings, muddy afternoons, and long, smoke-choked evenings. Breakfast? Usually porridge. Again, barley, mostly thick gray and vaguely salty or sweet. If someone found some honey or had the energy to add dried berries. It's served in a big shared wooden bowl, and you scoop your share with a spoon carved from horn. You eat quickly because the bowl won't stay full for long, and your cousin has already eaten more than his share. Again, you're always a little hungry. Not starving, but never really full. Even on feast days, when there's more meat, more ale, and more shouting. You learn to eat fast and stash something in your pocket if no one's looking, because tomorrow might be back to watery stew and cold turnips. Your meals depend heavily on the season. In summer and early autumn, life feels slightly more generous. The goats give milk, the hens lay eggs, the forest offers berries, mushrooms, and the occasional overly ambitious squirrel that wandered too close to a snare. You eat fresh bread, if the family can spare the grain. You drink milk, sometimes warm, sometimes sour. You might even have fish roasted over an open fire, but by winter, the menu shrinks drastically. Everything is pickled, dried, smoked, or fermented. You chew through strips of dried fish that taste like ocean flavored bark. You spoon out cabbage that smells like regret. And you try not to gag when someone offers you fermented shark or rehydrated goat meat that's been hanging in the rafters for 6 months. There's a fringe Viking delicacy you've only heard about: Carl fermented Greenland shark. It smells like a sweaty sock full of ammonia and tastes even worse. Some say it was only eaten in Iceland, where food options were particularly grim. Historians still argue whether it was a regular dish or just something people dared each other to eat. You hope you never find out. Food is survival, not enjoyment. You eat what keeps you alive. You learn to forage early. Adults teach you which berries are safe and which ones will make you see colors that aren't there. You've been told that red mushrooms with white spots are poisonous, but I might let you see the gods. You're not curious enough to test that? You've also helped trap rabbits, gut fish, and once watched the village butcher a pig. You thought you'd be scared. Instead, you were fascinated. The careful process, the way nothing is wasted, the way people go quiet not out of sadness, but out of focus. Killing for food is serious, reverent, almost. You understand now why your father says a prayer before each meal. You've also learned meals are about hierarchy. The best bits go to the oldest and the most important. The head of the house gets the choicest cuts. The kids get what's left. You chew cartilage, gnaw bones, sip the last of the broth. And sometimes, if the meat is especially tough, you chew and chew until your jaw aches. Then casually drop it for the dog, who always looks at you like you're a hero. Speaking of dogs, they're your best food allies. They don't just guard the house, they clean it. You drop something, dog gets it. Porridge too salty, dog eats it. Bread too hard to bite, dog makes it disappear. You two have an understanding. You're both scavengers in your own way. Then there are the odd days, the mystery meals, like the time your uncle found something interesting in the woods. It looked like a root. It smelled like burnt onions mixed with socks. But he boiled it into a stew, added a handful of dried herbs, and proudly called it forest pudding. You ate it. You survived. You still think about it. Sometimes your food is wrapped in leaves. Sometimes it just plopped into your hands. Sometimes it falls into the fire and you dig it out with a stick, blow off the ash, and eat it anyway. Because food is food. When you're lucky, there's honey, or berries, or a bit of imported spice that someone traded 3 hides and a daughter's marriage promise for. That tiny sprinkle of cumin on your stew, you treasure it like gold. You try to memorize the taste, knowing it may never pass your lips again. Drinks are simple. Water, when it's clean. Milk, when it's available. Sometimes sour milk, thick and sharp, but better than nothing. On special days, watered down ale. Even for the children, it's weak, more nutritious than water, and less risky in a world where parasites love a muddy stream. You've tried mead once. Just a sip. Sweet and strange and warm all the way down. You weren't supposed to, but someone turned their back, and the cup was right there. You felt powerful for the rest of the day, like a grown-up, until you got sleepy and fell into the goat pen. There are feasts, of course. Big events, harvest celebrations, weddings, funerals, victories. Those nights, the longhouse bursts with smells, roasted meats, baked bread, spiced stews. There's singing, drumming, dancing, shouting. You get meat, and a piece of pie that someone drops, scoops up, and hands to you like a treasure. You eat it with your fingers. You don't care that it touched the floor, but those nights are rare. Most days, your meals are humble: a little broth, some oats, the heel of a loaf. You get used to chewing slowly, pretending it's something else, something warm and rich and wrapped in flaky crust. Then you wake up and find it's still porridge. You've never tasted sugar, not real sugar. You've heard of it, some strange white powder from faraway lands, but that might as well be a myth, like dragons or sandals that don't fall apart after 3 days. So, you dream about honey, about butter melting on hot bread, about eating until your belly is full and your fingers are sticky and no one tells you to save any for tomorrow. But until then, you scrape your bowl, lick your fingers, and thank the gods you're not hungry yet. You scratch your head for the 100th time today, not because you're thinking deeply about the mysteries of the universe, but because something is definitely crawling in your hair. Again, welcome to the glamorous world of Viking childhood, where lice are more loyal than your siblings. Everyone itches. It's just part of life. You, your cousins, even the elders who pretend otherwise. It's not like anyone has shampoo or clean pillowcases. Your longhouse is a warm, damp, wool-filled paradise for creepy crawlies. So you scratch, constantly, behind your ears, under your tunic, along the waistband of your trousers, and sometimes you compare bug bites with your friends. You point to your favorite one like it's a prize, and lice are only the beginning. You've had warts, weird ones, one on your knuckle that looked like a tiny toad, another near your ankle that made your shoe feel cursed. Your grandmother insists on treating them with something she calls earth milk, which turns out to be moss soaked in goat's urine. You're not sure it helped, but the wart left eventually, probably out of embarrassment. Then there are the colds, the coughs, the odd rashes that pop up after you play in the river, or eat that thing you thought was a berry but clearly wasn't. You don't go to a doctor, there are no doctors. You go to the nearest adult with an opinion and a pouch full of dried things that smell like disappointment. Some remedies are harmless: chamomile tea, warm goat milk, a compress made from mashed garlic and honey. Others less so. Your aunt once smeared your forehead with goose fat and whispered to Thor for 20 minutes. You're still not sure if it helped or if the illness just got bored and left. And then there's spit. Viking medicine loved spit. It was believed to have healing powers, especially first morning spit, straight from sleep. If you've got an infected scratch, someone might hawk a loogie right onto it and call it a blessing. You don't argue. You just wince and try not to gag. You've also been burned. Not badly, but enough to remember. You brushed too close to the hearth. Or maybe a hot cooking stone tipped when you were trying to grab the last piece of meat. Your mother rubbed a dark salve on the wound. She said it was made from pine pitch and ash. It smelled like campfire and regret. Sometimes you get fevers, hot, dizzy spells that make the world blur, and your legs feel like cooked barley. You lie on the floor near the fire, barely covered in a wool blanket, listening to the grown-ups whisper. They argue about whether it's a cold wind that got into your bones or whether you've been cursed by an elf. Yes, that's a thing. Elves aren't all twinkly and friendly in Norse belief. Some are malicious. They sneak into longhouses at night and press down on your chest while you sleep. They steal your breath, cause bad dreams, make your joints ache. There's a word for it. More at the same root as nightmare. If you wake up sweating and gasping, everyone nods solemnly. Elf sat on your ribs. Someone says, "The cure?" You might get a rune drawn on your forehead, or have iron placed under your pillow, or be made to sleep between two fire-blackened stones. It's weird, but you go along with it, because no one wants to risk more elf trouble. When you're really sick, too weak to stand, too tired to open your eyes, the house gets quiet. Everyone keeps doing their chores, but they speak in lower tones. Someone sets a small bowl of broth near you. Someone else tucks your bead pouch into your hand. Your sister sits close, not talking, just being there. You remember the last time someone was this sick. Your cousin. She didn't get better. You watched her eaves go dull and her breath slow until the house stopped pretending everything was fine. You didn't understand what was happening until they took her outside, wrapped tight in cloth, and buried her near the edge of the forest, where the ground was still soft enough to dig. No one sang. No one wept loudly. Your grandmother just stood by the grave and whispered something about the gods welcoming her. That was the day you realized sickness here doesn't always have an end. Or rather, it has one. Just not the one you want. Still, most days. You bounce back. You wake up groggy, sit up slowly, and the fever's broken. You eat plain bread and broth for a few days. You're tired, pale, but proud. You survived another bout of whatever seasonal misery made the rounds this time. And the truth is, your immune system is becoming a beast. All this exposure to dirt, germs, parasites, and questionable mushrooms is forging a child so resilient. You could probably lick a mossy rock and be fine. Not that you should, but you might. There's a fringe belief in some parts of Viking culture that the tougher the child, the more likely they were blessed by Thor. It wasn't official doctrine, but the idea lingered. Survive enough illness, and you might earn divine attention. You're not sure if Thor is watching you specifically, but just in case, you whisper a little thank you to the clouds every time you stop coughing, and the cycle continues. Itch, scratch, sneeze, groan, heal, repeat. You keep your bone comb nearby. You start braiding your hair tighter to keep out lice. You crush herbs under your boots to mask the smell of your tunic. You refuse to eat that mushroom again, even if your brother dares you. And when your younger cousin catches something next, you sit beside them with a cup of warm broth and say, "You'll be fine," because you were, and you will be again. You're playing with a stick one afternoon, pretending it's a spear, as usual, when two older boys get into a fight near the goat pen. Not a friendly scrap, not play fighting. This one's real. It starts with a shove, then a punch. Then someone picks up a rock and throws it hard enough to make your stomach lurch. You hear the dull, sickening sound as it hits bone. The other boy drops to his knees, dazed, blood running down the side of his face like someone poured red ink over his ear. And then silence. No one screams. No one runs for help. A few kids glance around. An adult looks up, sees the blood, and just says, "Good. Maybe now you'll think twice before speaking out of turn." That's it. No lecture, no comforting. No, "Are you okay?" The injured boy wipes his nose, staggers upright, and walks away with a scowl. The other boy shrugs and returns to his chores. Just another Wednesday. You stand there holding your stick, the pretend battle forgotten. Because in this world, real battles are never far off. And as a Viking child, you're expected not only to witness them, you're expected to grow into them. Violence is a shocking exception. It's the undercurrent of daily life. It's everywhere, stitched into your routine like smoke into wool. Sometimes it's loud and dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet and creeping. Either way, it shapes you. Discipline in your home is firm, direct, often physical. There are no long talks about consequences or morality. No one sits you down to explain your feelings. If you act out, you're corrected swiftly. A cuff to the ear for talking back, a slap across the knuckles for breaking a tool, a switch to the legs for skipping chores. And you don't cry. Not because you're brave, but because you've learned it won't help. Crying doesn't earn sympathy, it earns scorn. Save your tears for battle. Your uncle says when he catches you rubbing your eyes after a hard fall. You nod. You understand. You've heard worse. The other kids, they're no gentler. Teasing is a daily ritual. They pick at your clothes, your hair, the way you speak, the way you walk. The second you show weakness, they pounce. You learn to fight back first with words, then with fists, then with silence. The meaner kids lose interest when you stop reacting. Still, some wounds go deeper than bruises. You remember one boy, Enor, who couldn't take the teasing. He was small, quiet, always sneaking away to talk to animals or carve faces into sticks. One day, he stopped showing up to the morning chores. No one talked about it, but you saw his father drinking more than usual, saw his mother carrying a bundle out into the woods. You don't ask questions like that here. Sometimes you're scared of the other kids, of the adults, of yourself. You catch glimpses of something dark in the people around you. A quick backhand, a sudden shove, a moment of rage that burns hot and disappears just as fast. It teaches you to watch, to stay alert, to know when someone's in a bad mood just by the way they stir their stew. You learn when to speak, when to duck, when to disappear behind the smoke of the hearth. Even games are rough. Wrestling in the mud ends in bloody noses. Stick fights turn into real injuries. You once saw a girl knock a boy's tooth out with a well-aimed kick during a pretend raid. She got praised for it, because here, toughness is celebrated, and softness is dangerous. You've heard the stories. Weak boys grow into useless men. Girls who whine never find good husbands. People who can't defend themselves end up dead or worse, disgraced. So you push yourself harder, walk taller, speak louder. Even when you don't feel strong, you act like you are, because pretending's better than being the target. But there's a line, everyone knows it, even the ones who cross it. You once saw your cousin get struck by a grown-up in a moment of drunken anger. Too hard, too fast. Her head hit the beam beside the fire. She cried out not from pain, but from shock. The room went still, and your grandfather stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't hit anyone. He just walked over and looked the man in the eyes and said, "We break pigs, not children." And just like that, the line was drawn again. Because even in this harsh world, there are boundaries. Honor matters, reputation matters, and hurting someone without cause, especially a child, can stain a name for generations. People remember, whispers spread, and no one wants to be remembered as the one who beat a child bloody in a rage. But what counts as too far here is a narrow line. You're still expected to take hits, to face danger, to get hurt and come back stronger. If you get into a fight, no one stops it unless blood is involved. You're supposed to learn your limits, test your courage, get bruised, and get back up. There's an old saying, a wound heals, but cowardice festers. So you spar, you grapple, you push, you challenge, you lose, and you win. All of it is part of your training, not just for battle, but for life, for the long, grueling haul of adulthood and adulthood in the Viking world. Starts earlier than most people today could imagine. You're already on your way. There's a strange comfort in that. You know your place, you know your strengths, you're earning your scars one by one, and each one whispers to the world, I can take it. I'm still here. But some days, late at night, when the fire's low and the longhouse hums with soft breathing and distant wind, you allow yourself a moment, just one. You clutch your carved raven, you pull your scratchy blanket tighter, you close your eyes and imagine a place where the world is quiet, safe, still, and then you let it go, because morning's coming, and with it, a whole new round of challenges to survive. You wake up one morning to find your brother gone, not off to the river gone, not hunting with father gone, just gone. No one says anything at first. People move around the longhouse like usual feeding animals, stoking the fire, chewing their rough bread in silence. But the absence is loud, even in all that quiet. You ask where he is, and your mother says, without looking up, Hez with the gods now? You don't understand at first. You wait for him all day. You glance at the door every time it creaks open. You save a piece of your dried apple for him, but he doesn't come back. And slowly, it settles over you. He never will. Loss is part of Viking life. It walks beside you from the moment you're born. In a world where sickness, injury, and winter are constant threats, everyone loses someone, and often it happens without warning. One day, a cough, the next, a fever, then stillness. There are no long, drawn-out hospital visits, no gentle farewells, no soft white linens. There's just one less pair of footsteps, one less bowl to fill at mealtime, one fewer voice in the chorus of evening noise. Your brother was older by 2 winters. He taught you how to tie a knot with cold fingers. He showed you how to scare crows away from the drying fish by flapping your arms like a lunatic. He once gave you his half of a smoked herring because you were crying over a stubbed toe, and he didn't like seeing you cry. Now he's gone. The funeral isn't a grand affair. Not for children. There's no burning ship. Just a grave dug shallow, where the ground isn't too hard. Wrapped in cloth. His small body is lowered into the earth. Someone lays his wooden spoon on his chest. Someone else whispers a prayer to Freyr for peace. No one cries loudly. Tears are private here. Grief is quiet. Bone deep and worn like an old bruise you don't talk about. Your mother doesn't say much for 3 days. She keeps doing her tasks, feeding the animals, stirring the stew, bending over the fire until her back aches. But she doesn't hum anymore. And she doesn't braid your hair before bed like she used to. You don't ask for it. You just sit close, hoping she'll remember. You've seen this kind of silence before. Your friend's sister died last spring from a cut that festered and turned her skin black. She was 10. Afterward, her father stopped speaking entirely for a week. Just sat at the edge of the village, sharpening his axe like he was waiting for someone to give him a reason to use it. Everyone mourns differently, but no one pretends it didn't happen. Sometimes, at night, you hear the adults talking when they think you're asleep. He was strong, someone says. Not strong enough, says another. Maybe the gods needed him, whispers your grandmother. Her voice is fragile, like parchment left too close to the fire. You start having strange dreams. You see your brother walking away into a snowy forest. He doesn't turn back. You call out, but your voice makes no sound. When you wake, the sadness sits on your chest like a stone, and then, just like that, life continues because it has to. There are chores to do, animals to feed, walls to patch, meals to cook. Grief doesn't earn you a day off. You still have to haul water, even when your eyes are red and your shoulders slump. You still have to listen to stories at night, even if your heart isn't in them. At first, you feel guilty. Laughing at a goat's ridiculous sneeze feels like betrayal. Smiling at a feast feels like forgetting. But slowly, without realizing it, the weight of sorrow shifts. It doesn't leave you, it just stops pressing quite so hard. There's a kind of resilience in Viking families that's hard to explain. Loss doesn't shatter them, it hardens them, smooths their edges, turns memory into fuel. You begin to understand why the old stories focus so much on death not as tragedy, but as transition, a return to the earth, a step onto the path of legend. Your grandmother tells you, gently, if he made it to Valhalla, he's already drunk half the mead and arm wrestled Thor's goats. You want to believe her. You picture him laughing again, clutching a mug as big as his head. It helps. And you're not the only one who's lost someone. Your friend's baby sister died in the cold last winter. Another boy's father drowned in a storm. A girl you played with last spring now wears a necklace made from her dead mother's ring. Everyone you know carries ghosts. Some in pouches around their necks, some in their eyes. Death is not a distant, faraway concept. It's in the room, in the corner, in the air you breathe when someone coughs for too long. You grow up fast with that knowledge. It makes you braver in strange ways. You take more risks, climb higher trees, sneak closer to the forge, run faster across the ice because you know how easily it all ends. But you also grow more careful. You learn to listen for danger, to read signs, to care for others even when you can't protect them. One day, while helping your mother prepare dried fish, she pauses and says, "You're strong, like him." It's the first time she's spoken of your brother in weeks. You nod. The fish slips from your hand. She doesn't scold you. Later that night, as the wind hums through the thatch above, you whisper your brother's name into the darkness. Just once. Softly. Not for him. For you. You're 10 now, maybe 11. You've survived more winters than some of your friends. You've buried siblings, dodged sickness, learned to gut a fish in the dark, and you've got the calluses to prove it. And now, whether you feel ready or not, the grown-ups begin to talk about your future. Not in the dreamy, what do you want to be kind of way. No one's asking if you like animals or want to study clouds. No one cares if you're passionate about textiles. Here, your path has been decided for you since the moment your mother screamed you into this world. You'll marry, or you'll raid, or maybe both. That's it. If you're a boy, the expectation is straightforward: become a man. And in Viking culture, that means proving yourself useful to the community and terrifying to anyone outside of it. You'll farm, fish, build, fight. Hopefully, you'll do all four. But eventually, you'll be expected to leave, to go on your first raid. It's not a casual suggestion, it's a rite of passage. Your older cousin did it at 13. He came back taller, louder, and carrying a wooden spoon from somewhere called England. You don't know where that is, but everyone seemed impressed. He also came back with a scar on his leg and eyes that looked older. You've heard the stories of raids all your life. Long ships slicing through the mist, warriors howling like wolves. gold glittering in the halls of terrified monks. It all sounds heroic until you notice how no one ever talks about the fear, the cold, the men who didn't come back. You've asked once, what happens if someone refuses to go? The answer, they stay behind, but no one sings about them. And if you're a girl, things aren't easier, just different. By the time your voice settles and your arms grow stronger, you're already being looked at differently. Grown women whisper about matches, dowries, and land. You're suddenly useful not just for your hands, but for your womb. You've watched older girls get married off at 12. You've seen a girl your age cry quietly behind the goat pen after hearing who her husband would be. Marriage, in the Viking world, is less about love and more about alliances. It's a contract, a means of gaining land, forging peace, or strengthening bloodlines. You could be promised to someone miles away, someone you've never met. You might go willingly. You might not. No one asks for your opinion. But don't think that means you're powerless. Viking women, though still confined by their time, held more autonomy than many others in medieval Europe. Some even fought. Some managed land. Some ran households with an iron ladle and a glare that could silence a mead hall. You've seen it. You've also seen the dangers. Childbirth is a shadow that never leaves. It's not a milestone, it's a gamble. One that can end in blood, silence, and another too small grave dug before dawn. Your friend's older sister died that way. The baby lived, barely. The room was quiet for days. So when the grown-ups start saying things like, "You're becoming a woman," you don't feel proud. You feel a little sick. You clutch your Thor's hammer pendant tighter and wonder what it would be like to sail away instead. Some do. There are tales of girls who cut their hair, stole armor, and joined raids disguised as boys. Sometimes they're caught. Sometimes they become legends. Historians still argue whether shield maidens were common or rare, myth or memory. But in your stories, they're real and fierce. And you wonder, could that be you? Either way, your childhood is ending. You feel it in the way people speak around you, in the way your tasks become more serious. You're asked to make decisions, carry heavier loads, speak in public without mumbling. One day, your uncle tosses you a real blade, not sharp, but close, and says, "Start sleeping with this under your blanket, just in case." Just in case what? He doesn't answer, but you do what he says, because in this world, safety is a privilege, not a promise. You've heard the raid horn before. Once, during a summer storm, when the shadows of unfamiliar sails appeared near the fjord, everyone sprang into motion, spears, shields, screaming. You and the other children were ushered into the storage pit beneath the longhouse, cold, dark, and damp. You sat there for hours, clutching your pouch of charms, listening for the sounds of fire or footsteps. They didn't come ashore that night, but you learned. The danger isn't just stories. It's real, and it's near. Now, when people speak of your future, you listen differently. You're no longer dreaming of who you'll be or calculating what you'll survive. You try to imagine your wedding day or your first raid. Either way, you picture yourself wearing the same wool tunic, standing tall, hiding the quake in your stomach behind a practiced grin, because in Viking culture, fear is normal. But showing it, that's weakness, and weakness, that's how you end up forgotten. So you practice your grip on your little knife. You listen to the stories with sharper ears. You memorize the sagas like maps, hoping they'll guide you through what's coming next. And sometimes, Just before sleep, you whisper to the gods, not for glory, not for gold, just to make it through one more day. You wake before the sun, again. It's the dead of night, but the longhouse stirs. Someone's moving near the fire. You hear the soft clang of iron, the swish of fabric, the wet snore of an uncle who never rolls over. But what wakes you is not the sound, it's the feeling, that strange itch between your shoulder blades, the creeping sense that something is watching. Not someone. Something. You've grown up hearing about it. Everyone has. The unseen world is all around you, laced through the fields and forests, sliding between the shadows of the longhouse like smoke through thatched beams. And now, as you come of age, the warnings begin to feel more personal. Because in Viking childhood, the gods are not distant. They're here, everywhere, watching. You rise slowly, your small charm pouch tied tight around your neck. Inside are a carved bead, a dried herb your grandmother insists wards off elves, and the smooth wooden raven your uncle gave you long ago. You whisper a quick word to Thorabit now and pad quietly to the fire, stepping over legs and cloaks. No one else is awake, except maybe her, the old woman at the far end of the hall. She sleeps with her back to the wall and always seems to know more than she should. Tonight, she's staring into the embers, not blinking, not moving. You pause, not sure whether to speak. She doesn't turn to look at you, but somehow knows you're there. They saw you last night. She murmurs. Your throat goes dry. Who? The ones with no shadows. You don't know if she means spirits, elves, the dead, or if she's just speaking in dreams again. But her voice carries weight, and you've learned better than to laugh off words like that. In the Viking world, belief is survival. Superstition isn't weakness, it's insurance. You don't challenge the unseen. You respect it. That's why the amulets are worn. The runes are carved. The offerings are made. At the doorway, there's a small bowl of milk, left out by your mother the night before. She says it's for the Landvatire spirits of the land, protectors of the homestead. You're not supposed to speak their names too loudly. You just leave food, whisper thanks, and never, ever forget. And if you do forget, bad luck. A turned ankle, a storm at sea, a plague that sweeps through the village like spilled ink. People talk about fate all the time here. But fate isn't random. It's watched, shaped, tugged at like thread by the gods and their messengers. You hear about them in stories. Odin, the one-eyed wanderer who sacrifices and schemes in equal measure. Thor, loud and brave and ever thirsty. Freya, riding a chariot of cats, accepting half of the warriors who die in battle. But then there are the darker ones. Loki, whose tricks always seem to start with laughter and end in fire. Hell, queen of the underworld, whose touch is said to turn bones to ice. And the Norns, the weavers of fate. 3 sisters, older than the gods themselves. They live beneath Yggdrasil, the great tree, spinning the fates of gods and men alike. You've never seen them, but you imagine them sometimes, in your dreams, braiding lives together like horsehair, cutting threads without warning. The grown-ups say the gods test children too. They might send you visions, strange luck, an animal that stares too long, a whisper in the trees. Once, a raven landed beside you and didn't move for a whole minute. You stared into its eye and felt something deep and ancient settle in your bones. Your grandmother called it a sign. You didn't ask what it meant. You're not sure you want to know. Some say that certain children are marked, touched by the gods. Meant for greatness or for doom, it's hard to tell which. Your cousin claims she saw her dead sister in a dream and woke with a streak of white in her hair. Now, everyone watches her more closely, not with fear, more like expectation. You've begun having dreams, too. You walk through snow that burns your feet. You see wolves with golden eyes and rivers that flow backwards. Once, you dreamt of standing at the bow of a ship while a giant serpent swam beneath you, circling. You didn't tell anyone about that one. But the fear stayed. And so did the awe. Because the gods are not just figures in stories. They're forces, powers, real in a way that feels both terrifying and comforting. When the thunder rolls across the valley, you know Thor is nearby. When a coin drops through the floorboards and disappears forever, you know the house spirit claimed it. Historians today still argue how literally Vikings believed in these beings. Were they metaphor or daily presence? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. But for you, as a child of the North, there is no doubt. They are here, so you follow the rituals. You never whistle at night. You never walk alone in the woods without an offering. You whisper apologies to trees you cut and thank your tools after they serve you well. It's not superstition, it's etiquette. One day, you help with a small animal sacrifice, a goat, old and tired. It's done quickly, respectfully. A prayer is murmured. The blood is caught in a bowl and later smeared on a stone near the woods. You feel the seriousness of it, the weight. This isn't just about gods. It's about balance. You're not scared of them, exactly, but you are careful, because in the Viking world, you're not the center of the universe. You're a thread in the weave, a child under watch, and if the gods notice you, if they really notice you, it might be a blessing or a test. That night, as the wind groans through the rafters and the fire dims to a flicker, you lie awake. Not afraid. Not exactly, but aware. And you whisper a quiet thank you into the darkness, just in case. The morning sun creeps in through the smoke hole as a pale glow, weak and watery, just enough to make your breath fog when you sit up. You stretch, joints popping, and feel it. The heaviness in your limbs, the ache in your knees, the dull stiffness in your back. You're not old. You're barely past childhood. But your body already knows hardship. You've survived a Viking childhood. Not just survived, but endured. The cold, the hunger, the bruises, the grief, the long winters, the short tempers, the endless smoke that has probably done something awful to your lungs. And still, you're here. Your fingers are calloused. Your knuckles are scraped. You've pulled your own splinters and tied your own wounds. You can carry a pail of water uphill without spilling more than a few drops. You can sleep on dirt and wake up ready to work. You've learned to swing an axe, sharpen a blade, skin a fish, and bury a friend. You are, by Viking standards, becoming someone worth keeping around. There's no party, no official rite, no big moment when someone says, "You've made it." But people look at you differently now. They expect more, trust more, scold less. Sometimes they even ask for your opinion. You've passed through the unspoken test. Make it through childhood, and you belong here. It's a brutal kind of belonging, but it's real. You still get scared sometimes. The woods are still dark. Storms still make you jump. But fear isn't weakness. Here it's information. You use it. You listen to it. You act in spite of it. That's the Viking way. Not fearless, but resilient. Not invincible, but willing. You don't daydream about running away anymore. You daydream about contributing. You picture the boat you'll help build, The fields you'll help sow, the feast you'll one day host, where others will drink to your name. Because for all its harshness, this world is yours, and you've earned your place in it. And you carry a pouch of small treasures items no one else would call valuable. A bone bead from your first real chore, a raven carving, a burnt sliver of driftwood from the time lightning struck the water near your village. Each piece is proof, a timeline of survival. You've lost friends, siblings, maybe even a parent, but loss hasn't hollowed you, it's deepened you, given you stories, made you careful, made you grateful. You've learned how to hold sadness without letting it drown you. You've also learned how to laugh. Viking humor is rough, loud, and often at your expense, but it's there. In the teasing over spilled soup, in the retelling of the time you fell in the pig trough and tried to pretend it was a battle tactic, in the snorting laughter of adults who once terrified you and now seem just as exhausted as everyone else. There's a lightness under the weight, if you look for it. And you do, because life is hard enough without joy. And joy, when it appears here, is real, earned, like a patch of sunlight after weeks of cloud. You still remember your first winter, your first real chore, your first cut, first lie, first whispered prayer to the gods. Now, you're collecting new firsts, first time hunting alone, first time helping with a birth, first time being trusted with someone else's secret. You still listen to the sagas, but now you start to see yourself in them. Not as the hero, at least, not yet, but as one of the many who endure, who fight, who hold the line when it matters. And that's everything. You'll grow more, of course. There are still trials ahead, raids, marriages, betrayals. You'll make mistakes. You'll carry guilt. You'll gain pride. You'll become someone the younger children look to whether you're ready or not. And when that day comes, you'll know what to tell them. You'll tell them the truth. That childhood in the Viking Age was brutal. Yes, but it made you. It carved you out of cold and fire and time. And it left you standing. Still here, still strong, still you. And now, as the longhouse quiets, so do you. The stories fade into low embers. The air is warm around your feet, the smoke curling softly in the rafters above. Outside, the wind has settled. The wolves are far away tonight. You've done your chores. You've eaten your share. You've survived another day. You lie on your back, on a patch of old sheepskin, with your blanket tucked up to your chin. The floor beneath you is cold, but familiar. The sounds around you are comforting now, soft breathing, a low crackle, the occasional shifting of a boot near the fire. You're not afraid anymore. You've learned the shape of this world, the way it moves, the way it holds you, even when it feels too heavy. You've learned that you are stronger than you thought, tougher than you knew, and braver than you ever expected to be. You've learned that survival isn't loud. It's quiet, steady. It's showing up again and again when no one's watching. It's sleeping with your little knife under your blanket. It's whispering to the gods just in case. And now, the gods are quiet too. The stars outside blink softly above the thatch, and the night hums with a kind of peace you've earned. Close your eyes. Viking child, you've done enough. End of story. Sweet dreams.